This is Fong featuring an emulator review of War of the Monsters. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if the monsters from Rampage got into a brawl like in Super Smash Bros? Probably not, but if you're into that kind of thing, then War of the Monsters should be right up your alley. This is a game that is rich in both theme and character, but above all else is simply about having fun. So, does War of the Monsters succeed or should just be forgotten? Let's start with controls. They do take a little getting used to, but after a few rounds you should be able to adjust. First off, this game has tank controls, but it's not as bad as it sounds. Unlike most games with this control scheme, War of the Monsters use the analog stick, so movement is swifter and feels more like driving rather than turning a clock. You can also strafe left and right to make sharp turns and position yourself more accurately. Even if that doesn't sound pleasant, there's no need to worry, because you'll be spending most of your time locking onto your opponent. To do so, you simply hold down both strafe buttons. Doing so will allow you to move about more freely while keeping the camera aimed in the direction of your target. Also, when you get into melee range, the camera pans out, giving you a view of your surroundings, while also giving you open movement similar to most 3D platformers. However, it can be annoying at times when the camera and controls suddenly change on you. When you first start swinging around at your opponent, you might think that the combat is a bit sloppy or that it lacks depth. And, while the game doesn't properly orchestrate all the moves available to the player in-game, there are a few tactical attacks that do add some nuance to the fighting. You have your basic strong and light attacks along with some ranged projectiles, and if you happen to read through the manual, you'll learn some more advanced moves such as dashing, juggling, and stunning, and the ever so important dive attack. Beware while fighting, because each attack drains stamina and some characters run out faster than others. If you deplete all your stamina, then you temporarily lose the ability to attack, leaving you vulnerable. To avoid this, there are two ways to replenish your stamina. One is to pick up stamina orbs, and the other is to use weapons. Both require you to interact with the environment. If you completely fill your stamina or pick up a red orb, then you gain the ability to perform a special attack. All characters have both a range special and an area of effect special. The AoE special is the same for everyone with just a different visual effect and animation. However, the range specials are unique for each monster, with attacks that are reminiscent of Scorpion's throwing spear and Ernest's electric shock. The battles take place in decently sized arenas that are very interactive. The levels are well scaled and things are neither too big or, more importantly, too small. This gives you the feeling of massiveness without diminishing the importance of your surroundings. You'll spend as much time navigating through the environments as you will be fighting opponents. What makes this game shine is how they incorporate the arenas into the actual battle. Each level is part of the battle and they are almost like characters in their own right. The arenas are filled with many scalable buildings which can be used as cover or even ambush points. They also provide a level of verticality that you won't find in other fighting or beat-em-up games. Also keep in mind that the buildings aren't just for climbing. Most all of them can be toppled if they take enough damage. War of the Monsters has some of the most destructible environments I've seen in any game. You can use this to your advantage, as destroying structures usually provides access to more weapons. Speaking of weapons, they play a big part of the battles and there are many to choose from. You can pick up and throw just about anything that isn't bolted down, such as vehicles and rubble. There are also a few more specialized weapons, such as metal beams that can be swung around like bats, and pointy radio towers that must be annoyingly pulled out. As I mentioned earlier, using weapons is how you restore stamina, so you should always be on the lookout for useful items. Thus, becoming familiar with the layout is probably the most important aspect of a fight. Some levels also feature events that can be triggered that make the arenas active members of the fight. These events can range from erupting a volcano which will target your enemies, to attacking a UFO which creates a tsunami. Using them to your advantage requires proper positioning and timing so that you can get the greatest effect without getting caught in your own trap. There are 3 single-player modes: Free, Endurance, and Adventure. Free mode is pretty standard. You select the monsters and number of lives, and then enter the arena. In endurance mode, you go against an endless onslaught of enemies one after another. You do acquire points in this mode, which I'll discuss later, but once the levels get destroyed, things get a bit tedious. Adventure mode is where you'll be spending most of your time. It's practically just an arcade mode, where you go from stage to stage with the simple goal of being the last monster standing. Things start off simple with one-on-one battles, but you soon have to take on multiple enemies at once. There are also military vehicles that appear during these battles that serve as additional grunts, but they can also be used as unique weapons if you manage to pick them up. There are a total of 3 bosses that you come across in adventure mode, but they're mostly the same. Each one revolves around picking up objects and throwing them at the boss. There are a few slight variations, such as catching bombs that are thrown at you, or the boss being vulnerable to radioactive UFO pieces. Anyway, once you beat the final boss, you'll get a cliffhanger ending, which is more of a throwback to B monster movies rather than the honest build toy sequel. Afterwards, you get a short cutscene showing the origins of your monster, but some are more interesting than others. And this can give you a reason to play through again with every monster if you're looking for some extra replay value. I did find a few issues while playing through adventure mode. Firstly, the levels are exactly the same every time you play through with each of the characters. I think it would have been far less tedious if the stages and opponents were randomized like a typical arcade mode, or even if they were different for every character. The second issue is that the goal of every stage is to just defeat your opponent. The plant boss stage is the only exception, where you have to destroy the energy reactors. It would have been nice to have a few bonus levels where you could just destroy a city or fight through the man-made defenses. This game even has multiplayer minigames which have easily been integrated into the adventure mode to break up some of the repetition. As advertised on the back of the box, this game features an array of unlockable content, which is where most of the replayability is. There are 2 hidden monsters and every character has a total of 4 different outfits. There are also a few hidden levels and 2-player minigames. To unlock stuff, you spend points which are gained by playing either in adventure mode or endurance mode. To give you an idea of how long it takes to unlock things, the characters cost 200,000 points and can obtain upwards of 100,000 points every time you beat adventure mode. When it comes to the costumes, some are just different color palettes, while other are complete redesigns that make them look like new monsters. The price of the costumes vary, with the basic ones being cheap and the elaborate ones being more expensive. The same can be said about the levels. So after you get the more expensive stuff, there will be little to look forward to. Speaking of hidden and unlockable content, this game does something neat that I would like to bring up. Agama's 4th costume cannot be unlocked by any means in-game. The only way to obtain it is to have a save file of Twisted Metal Black. If you're wondering what makes this costume so special, it's actually a cameo of Sweet Tooth from Twisted Metal. I really appreciate these types of hidden Easter eggs. I know some might consider this to be dislocked content, but what you get from the save tends to be a reference to the other game. So if you aren't familiar with the other game, then you won't be missing out. And if someone knows about the hidden content, then might give attention to games that they wouldn't have been interested in otherwise. Getting back to the review, one of the things that War of the Monsters does very well is creating a world and theme and then sticking to it. If you remember the intro to Super Smash Bros., it takes place in a child's room with the characters actually being toys that are pitted against each other in an imaginary tournament. However, outside of the intro and countdown screen, the theme is absent for most of the game. And while it does work well for Smash Bros., War of the Monsters feels so immersed in its own setting that you can't help but appreciate the amount of attention and detail that was put into the game's world. Each of the characters are evidently inspired by the classic monster movies of old. And even if you aren't acquainted with the source material, it's hard to shake off a sense of familiarity. You don't have to have watched Godzilla or King Kong movies for you to recognize Togura's atomic breath, a conjurer of savagery. You don't need to know what the super robot genre is to appreciate the sleek and toy-like design of Ultra 5. The designs in this game don't just imitate outside sources to please the fans of the original, they introduce newcomers by recreating what made the original so great and iconic. Even the start menu and character screens are appropriately stylized, taking place at a drive-thru theater. You can tell that a lot of care and fun was put into making this game, and it translates well to the player. This is something I don't see too often in many video games, and it's one of the reasons I feel makes War of the Monsters so fun to play. Before I wrap this up, I want to quickly mention the manual. It carries a lot of useful information that isn't clearly stated in-game, such as the ability to grab objects that are thrown at you, and using taunts to get an extra boost. There's also a lot of backstory that sets up the events of the game and character bios to help establish the mood. The manual is also fully colored with pictures to illustrate the gameplay, and going in theme with the game, it's all written in the style of an old news report, giving it that extra attention to detail. While I can say I did enjoy playing this game and would recommend it to anyone looking for a fun party brawler, it may not be for everyone. If you don't have the patience to get used to the controls or you are easily bored by repetition, then this game isn't for you. However, if you want to play a game with giant monsters that is actually decent or you find the aesthetic interesting, then go ahead and give War of the Monsters a try. Thanks for watching, and please leave a comment below. If you'd like to see more emulated reviews, then feel free to subscribe.